This is the construction log of the high-security, all-hybrid research facility in Jurassic World Evolution 2. Please click on the thumbs up icon to scan your fingerprint to verify your security clearance. Welcome. You have been granted access to the step-by-step construction process. Before even hitting record, the construction of this hybrid research base started with the monorail glitch. No special security clearance needed. I've covered this glitch as well as how to get dinosaurs into the aviary and many other game-changing glitches in a previous video that I will link at the end of this one. The construction process is completely without mods. If you like creative builds just like this, consider subscribing because the channel is full of it, with much more to come. The second step was to build the roof of the main area of the research facility using the monorail tracks. This is a lengthy and kind of tedious process, but I really wanted to have an overhead structure instead of having the facility out in the open. I felt like that made the most sense for security purposes and the given environment that I chose to build this in, where there would be a dangerous snowy environment outside and climate control inside. By the way, speaking of the environment, something I realized too late was that the map I am building on, Square California, doesn't have a snow weather effect. It has rain. That wasn't my intention, but the building was too far along for me to want to start over. The addition of a lagoon might surprise you since we don't have lagoon hybrids, but I snuck in the Styxosaurus through a bit of storytelling that the researchers are studying the Styxosaurus' natural bioluminescence to transfer that to their hybrids. I just really wanted to add a lagoon for some variety in the build, and I needed an excuse to do that, and I always like coming up with stories as I'm building anyway. As I was building, I kind of played around with the futuristic idea that this hybrid facility might be built on the moon, which would also explain why everything needs to be inside a superstructure. But I ended up not fully leaning into that idea, although I do think you could have fun building something like that and using the terrain tools around the structure to create the craters that we see on the surface of the moon, so I wanted to throw that out there for you. The construction of the Monro Roof is honestly just me playing around, trying to come up with an interesting shape that I like, as opposed to just a standard rectangle. As I do this, I do consider where I want the main structure to branch out with some walkways that lead to the aviary domes that will house the hybrids, but I don't put too much thought into the buildings that will go inside the monorail structure eventually. Those I just puzzle in later. Not much planning goes into any of my builds. People ask me a lot how I plan these out, but usually the only planning that I do is a broad concept, and then I just start somewhere and fiddle around until it turns into something that I like. To add to the high security aspect of it, I'm using the pylons of the power lines to create walls for the entire structure, which I think works better than simply using fences, as the pylons cover the full height of the monorail track. The next step is to lay down the pathing. I don't do anything yet in the main area of the structure, as the pathing there has to happen hand in hand with placing the buildings, and that is one of the later steps in this build. I start with the paths that branch off to the aviaries, which finalizes the layout of the entire build and gets it ready for the addition of those aviaries. I felt it was easier to lay down the paths first and place those aviaries at the end of those, rather than place the aviaries and then bring the path up to them, because I needed my path to branch out perfectly straight, considering how I would be turning them into covered walkways instead of simply exposed path out in the open. So this is the idea that sparked, honestly, the whole build, creating a roofing for the paths. To give an obvious answer to a question you might have, yes, this blocks off the path. You can no longer walk down the path in first-person mode or capture mode due to the hitbox of these storage sheds that I'm using. However, they don't disrupt the path connection to the aviaries, so it is technically functional in-game. It's one of those ideas that maybe a lot of people won't like, but given how much I build in this game, I don't mind stretching it this far once in a while, even though it leaves me with a build that I can't fully access myself if I want to walk around. I think from an aerial perspective, it looks cool, it's a unique idea, and after over 2 years, I think we're all looking for new things to try, especially us folks who don't use mods, and especially after missing out on a free update to accompany the most recent DLC. At this point, if it looks cool, that's good enough for me. If you do like this idea and want to try it out yourself, I recommend to have the angle snap toggled on for the entire build so that your decorations line up perfectly with your path and it's easy to flip them 180 degrees to do the other side. You could work with more, let's say, nuanced angles, as opposed to all the 90-degree angles that my build consists of, but then you will end up with more gaps, because obviously you won't be able to connect these sheds at the intersection, and that's something that I wanted to avoid. I was really focused on minimizing the gaps, so it would look like a continuous and proper roof down the entire length of all of the paths. Placing the aviaries at the perfect angle and as close as possible was kind of a hassle, not gonna lie. I had to readjust them constantly to line them up perfectly with the end of my walkways. Again, to make sure that there was a minimal gap there. By the way, if you are wondering why I chose the Jurassic World viewing galleries when you might say the DFW viewing galleries make more sense, there is actually a reason for that, and again, it's about minimizing gaps. The Jurassic World viewing galleries allow you to get much closer with the decorative shed than the other styles, which have a hitbox that demand a much bigger distance between the entry of the building and the nearest item you can place. This is of course all a happy accident for people who play the game on an older console and have to choose one era to build in. The monorail track, the glass aviaries, and these viewing galleries are all in the Jurassic World building set. Unfortunately, the Jurassic World building set does not include the shed that I used, but you do have the Indoraptor cage that I considered using myself. It doesn't have a roof, but you can build a protected walkway with them. That is assuming you want to do all this tedious exact placement work on a console, of course. If you do, mad respect. The next step is to turn the interior of the aviaries into biodomes, and I used a couple of different biomes for the species. I was pretty random with my selection of the biomes. After all, they are hybrids, so I feel like you can place them in whatever biome and claim that it is the correct one for them. There's really no right or wrong in my opinion, and I just wanted to use the opportunity to create some varied environments. The Indoraptor and the Indominus Rex both have tropical biomes, although they are different, with the Indominus Rex aviary having palm trees, which the Indoraptor cage does not. Knowing that I wanted to create these biomes is why I built the facility on this particular map, instead of Canada Square that I built Mini Manticore Island on, which also has several different biomes. During building Mini Manticore Island, I found that the brown grass on that map doesn't help with more lush biomes that you want to recreate, like tropical. Another reason, aside from my own laziness, why I didn't want to start over on the Canada map after realizing that California Square doesn't have a snow weather effect. The Stegoceratops and Ankylodocus both have a redwood environment in their aviaries, mostly because I really like the look of it, so I definitely wanted to do it twice. Typically, how I build an environment in a habitat is to start with the base terrain paint color, add the elevation and the water, the order of which can be flipped depending on which I happen to find more important for a given habitat. Then I add more varied terrain textures, then a whole lot of rocks, like a lot of rocks, and then finally the individually placeable trees. We're gonna pretend that I didn't forget that this map has a redwood foliage brush. The Spinoceratops and Spinoraptor had very water-based environments, with the Spinoceratops getting a more temperate lake setting with a big body of water and temperate trees, which are a mix of the ginkgo foliage brush and the individually placeable trees. And for the Spinoraptor, I attempted to make a swamp, although I am of the opinion that a swamp is the most challenging environment to make because none of the trees quite have the right look, just in my opinion. I really wasn't happy with how this habitat was turning out until I added some of the biosyn trees later, which have those mossy tendrils hanging off them that I think help create the right atmosphere. But it's not my favorite habitat, unfortunately, because of course Spinoraptor is my favorite hybrid. The Scorpius Rex I've given a desert biome purely for the sake of variety. By the way, if you are watching this and you have the game on an older console and you're thinking to yourself, okay, but I can't do different biomes because I don't have the all foliage option, I've actually done a tutorial on how to create different looking environments in all of the game's biomes, and I made that video before the all foliage option was added on PC and current gen console. That was added in an update, it wasn't like part of the game from launch. So for that tutorial, I was also limited to just the individually placeable trees and foliage brushes of the given biome, and I think I still managed to create really good variety. So if you are struggling creating different looking environments, different looking biomes within a single map, I recommend checking out that video. And even if you do have the all foliage option, I think that video still holds up as a good base that you can improve on with the new all foliage individually placeable trees. Shameless promotion out of the way, let's move into the interior of the research facility. Building inside the monorail tracks isn't super comfortable. It's a bit awkward to keep the camera low so you can see what you are doing. However, I do prefer this over the alternative of placing the buildings first and then laying down the roof over top, but that could be personal preference, so try out for yourself what works best for you. I think if you go in with more of a plan, something that I don't do, but if you have a plan, I think you would be able to reverse the order of things, place the buildings and the path first, and then create the monorail structure that you had in mind overhead. But again, I had no plan going into this. I'm just placing down whatever building that I like the look of and that I think will fit in the space, keeping in mind that I want to leave some pillars standing so the roof still has supports, which helps with the realism but also makes it look more interesting in my opinion. There is truly no rhyme or reason to this, it's just a case of finding puzzle pieces that I like the look of and then making them fit. It's another case of I don't think there is a right or wrong way to go about this, just place down what you think looks best. If you prefer to go in with a plan, you could sketch out a shape for the Monro Roof beforehand, but I don't think I'd advise it because I think you're going to make it harder on yourself given how finicky the monorail tracks can be to work with, and it might be too frustrating to bring your pre-planned vision to life in-game. And of course, in between placing the buildings, I'm also laying down the path. In the end, all I'm going for is as close to full coverage as possible. Unfortunately, due to the hitbox of some buildings, you can't get the path right up to them, but this is where the rock terrain texture comes to the rescue, which blends quite well with the Great Path, and this is why Sierra Nevada, for example, is another map that definitely wasn't an option for me to build in, because I didn't want to have snow inside the superstructure. After placing down my path and my buildings, it becomes a case of chucking in decorations to make the research facility look detailed and alive, I suppose. Make it look like there's actually work being done here. And I did this entire process in the nighttime because the end result would be all about nighttime, as that's when the bioluminescence of the animals shows. So I wanted to place lights very purposefully and know what it would all look like in the dark while I was working. Again, there's no big underlying thought process going on, I'm just fitting in as many decorations as I can. In case you're wondering, I always build these things while watching / listening to something on my other monitor, so it doesn't get too boring. Definitely a good tip for when you're making your Monro Roof, trust me on that one. This entire build took me 4 hours from start to finish, and I highly recommend it if you are looking for a relatively quick but unique build. And of course it doesn't have to be for hybrids, it can just be for any handful of species that you want to build a research facility for, and if you want you can take it to the extreme. I made it quite small, having only 7 species to draw from, but you can make it much more expansive. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe for more. Subscribing obviously means a lot to me, you'd really help me out, but it doesn't just let me know that you like this sort of content so I can make more of it, it also lets the YouTube algorithm know what you like so it can show you more of it, which is a win-win if you ask me. Stay tuned for the showcase of the end result, and I'll link some videos at the end that I think will help you with your next build. Thank you so much for watching, liking, subscribing, and until next time, enjoy the end result.